Princess Velshara stood at the observation window of the diplomatic vessel, watching the stars streak past in ribbons of light as the ship traveled through hyperspace. Her crystalline skin catching and reflecting the glow and patterns that marked her as royalty among the Lumineth people. She was tall and elegant, her body composed of living crystal that shifted between deep blues and purples depending on her mood. And right now those colors swirled with anxiety she tried to hide from her attendants. This mission to negotiate with the Krill Dominion was her first major diplomatic assignment, a chance to prove herself worthy of the throne she would someday inherit. But something felt wrong. Her psychic senses, normally so sharp and clear, felt muffled somehow, as if she were trying to see through fog. "Your Highness, we will be dropping out of hyperspace in 30 minutes, her chief guard, Commander Thelvis, announced with a respectful bow. The older Lumineth warrior had served her family for decades, his crystal form scarred from countless battles, each mark a story of loyalty. And Velshara nodded and tried to shake off her unease, telling herself it was just nerves about the upcoming negotiations. But deep in her core, where her people's psychic abilities resided, something whispered warnings she could not fully understand. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, and the warning klaxons began screaming before anyone could react. "We're under attack," the captain's voice crackled over the intercom as the ship lurched violently to one side. Velshara stumbled, catching herself against the wall as explosions rocked the vessel from multiple directions. Through the window she saw smaller ships swarming around them like insects, their weapons tearing into the diplomatic vessel's shields. "Pirates," Commander Thelvis growled, drawing his energy weapon and positioning himself between the princess and the door. "But how did they know our route?" The question died as the door exploded inward and armed figures poured into the observation room. They were a mixed crew of different species, hulking Vrax with their 6 arms, Slim Draven with cybernetic enhancements, and others Velshara didn't recognize, all wearing mismatched armor and carrying weapons that looked well used and deadly. Thelvis and her other guards fought with the skill and power of elite warriors, their energy blasts filling the air with crackling light. But there were too many attackers, and they kept coming, wave after wave. "Get the princess," one of the pirates shouted, a Vrax whose voice rumbled like an avalanche. "Alive. The boss wants her intact." Velshara tried to use her psychic abilities to push them back, to create barriers of force that should have sent them flying. But nothing happened. Her powers felt distant, unreachable, and panic began to set in as she realized these pirates had come prepared with dampening technology, specifically designed to neutralize her people's greatest advantage. "Commander." Thelvis grabbed her arm and pulled her toward a side corridor as more explosions shook the ship. "Run." "Your Highness," he commanded, his voice urgent. "Get to the escape pods. I'll hold them." He shoved her through the door and turned back to face the pirates, his weapon blazing. Velshara ran, her elegant ceremonial robes tangling around her legs as the lights flickered and died, leaving only emergency lighting that cast everything in red shadows behind her. She heard the sounds of fighting, energy weapons discharging, and then a terrible silence that told her more than words what had happened to her loyal guards. The ship groaned around her, metal screaming as the pirate vessels tore into it systematically, and she realized with cold certainty that this was not a random attack. Someone had betrayed them. Someone had given these pirates their route, their schedules, the locations of the guards. She was being hunted. The corridor branched, and she took the left path, heading toward where she remembered the escape pods were located. But the ship's damage had sealed several doors, and she had to backtrack, losing precious time. Her hearts hammered in her chest, all 3 of them beating a panicked rhythm as footsteps echoed behind her. "Getting closer. Found her," a voice called out, and Velshara turned to see 3 pirates emerging from the darkness. Their weapons raised, she pressed herself against the wall, trapped between them and a sealed bulkhead. Her mind racing through options that all ended the same way, without her powers. Without guards, without weapons, she was helpless, the lead pirate. A draven with glowing red cybernetic eyes. Grinned and raised what looked like a stun weapon. "End of the line, princess," he said. "Don't worry. We're not going to kill you. You're worth more alive to the crew. They're paying premium for a Lumineth Royal." The explosion came from nowhere. One moment the pirates were advancing, confident and cruel, and the next the wall beside them erupted in fire and smoke. Through the chaos, a figure emerged, moving with speed that seemed impossible, and before the pirates could react, they were down, their weapons clattering to the floor. Volshara tried to see her rescuer through the smoke and flickering emergency lights, but caught only glimpses. Humanoid shape, medium height, wearing battered armor that had seen countless battles, moving with a fluid grace that spoke of extensive combat training. The figure fought with a combination of advanced tactics and brutal efficiency, using the environment, the darkness, the pirates' own confusion against them. It was like watching a predator at work, calculated and precise, and Velshara found herself both terrified and awed. More pirates arrived, summoned by the commotion, and her mysterious savior engaged them without hesitation. Energy bolts filled the corridor, but the figure dodged with movements that seemed to predict where the shots would be before they were fired. Rolling, sliding, returning fire with weapons that barked with a sharp crackling sound Velshara had never heard before. In less than 2 minutes, all the pirates lay unconscious or groaning on the floor. The figure turned to her, and she saw a helmet reflecting the red emergency lights. Featureless and anonymous, a gloved hand reached out to her. "Come on," a voice said from behind the helmet, filtered and distorted, but somehow reassuring. "We need to move." Velshara took the offered hand and let herself be pulled to her feet. Her rescuer led her through the damaged ship with confident steps, clearly familiar with this type of vessel, avoiding collapsed sections and sealed doors, as if following a map only they could see. They reached the escape pod bay to find it mostly destroyed. Only 2 pods remaining functional. "Get in," her rescuer commanded, working the controls with practiced efficiency. "Wait," Velshara protested. "What about you? Who are you?" "No time," the figure said, gently but firmly pushing her into the pod. "There's a station 3 light hours from here. The pod's programmed. You'll be safe. Please." Velshara reached out, desperate to see the face of the one who saved her. "Let me thank you properly." "Let me." But the pod door was already closing, and through the small window, she saw her mysterious rescuer turn back toward the fighting, disappearing into the smoke and chaos. Without another word, the pod launched with a violent jerk, and Velshara was pressed back into the seat as it accelerated, away from the dying ship, through the rear viewport. She watched the diplomatic vessel being torn apart by the pirate ships, fires blooming across its hull. Then exhaustion and shock overtook her, and darkness claimed her consciousness. Her last thought, a burning question about the strange warrior who had appeared from nowhere to save her life. Velshara woke to bright lights and the antiseptic smell of a medical facility, her body aching but alive. And for a moment she couldn't remember where she was or how she had gotten there. A medical drone hovered nearby, its sensors scanning her continuously. And through the window, she could see the bustling corridors of what appeared to be a space station. "You're awake," a voice said, and she turned her head to see a station medic, a 4-armed Quillish whose fur rippled with concern. "You've been unconscious for 6 hours, Your Highness, but you're going to be fine." Memory crashed back like a wave. The attack, the pirates, the mysterious warrior who had saved her life. "Where am I?" she asked, trying to sit up despite the medic's protests. "Frontier Station, Kepler 9, the Quillish replied, gently pushing her back down. Your escape pod was picked up by one of our patrol ships. Your people have been notified, and your guards are already on their way. The person who saved me, Velshara interrupted urgently. The one who put me in the escape pod, are they here? Did they survive? The medic's fur rippled in a pattern that suggested confusion. Your Highness, you were alone in the pod, they said carefully. There was no one else. No. You don't understand, Velshara insisted, her crystalline hands gripping the medical bed's rails. There was someone on the ship. They fought the pirates. They saved my life. Perhaps you should rest, the medic suggested with the kind of gentle tone used for those suffering from trauma. You've been through a terrible ordeal. But Velshara was already pulling herself out of the bed. Ignoring the protests and the weakness in her limbs, her guards arrived within the hour. Led by Sub-Commander Kalrin, who had been traveling on a separate vessel, they surrounded her with protective concern, insisting she return to Lumineth space immediately. But she refused. I'm not leaving until I find the person who saved me, she declared with royal authority that brooked no argument. A younger warrior, who lacked Commander Thelva's patience, tried to reason with her. Your Highness, the diplomatic vessel was completely destroyed, he explained, showing her the incident reports on his datapad. There were no other survivors. Whoever helped you likely perished when the ship... No, Velshara cut him off. Her intuition stronger than logic. They got away. I know they did. And I will find them. She demanded to speak with the station's security chief, a grizzled Korthan whose scales had faded with age. He listened to her description of her rescuer with the expression of someone who had heard similar stories before. Sounds like the Wraith, he said finally, his gravelly voice thoughtful. The what? Velshara asked, leaning forward. That's what some folks call them, the security chief explained, pulling up files on his console. Been operating in this sector for about 2 years now. Shows up during pirate attacks. Slave raids, kidnappings, always helps the victims. Never sticks around for thanks or payment. He showed her surveillance footage from various incidents. A blurry figure pulling colonists from a burning settlement. Another image of someone taking down armed smugglers single-handedly. Always the same general build and fighting style. We've tried to track them down, the security chief continued. Partly to thank them, partly because, well, someone that good at fighting makes people nervous, but they're like smoke. Here one moment and gone the next. Someone must know who they are, Velshara pressed. Someone must have seen them without their helmet. Heard their real voice. The Korthan shrugged his massive shoulders. If they have. They're not talking, he said. Most folks around here respect the Wraith's privacy. Figure, if they want to stay anonymous. That's their business. But Velshara was a princess of the Lumineth Empire, with resources and authority that most people on this frontier station could barely imagine. She began offering rewards for information. Substantial amounts of credit that made even the most loyal admirers of the mysterious Wraith consider cooperating slowly. Piece by piece, she gathered intelligence. The Wraith frequented the lower levels of the station. The rougher areas were smugglers and information. Brokers conducted their business. They had been seen entering a cantina called the Broken Comet, an establishment known for catering to freelancers and mercenaries who valued discretion against Kalrin's strenuous objections. Velshara insisted on visiting the lower levels. This is dangerous. Your Highness, the sub-commander argued as they descended in a cargo lift. These are not civilized areas. The people here don't respect law or authority. Good, Velshara replied calmly. Then perhaps they'll give me honest answers. The lower levels were everything Kalrin had warned about and more. Dimly lit corridors where beings of dozens of species conducted business that wouldn't survive scrutiny in more respectable areas. The air thick with smoke from various substances. Music and arguments spilling from doorways. The Broken Comet was exactly as Velshara had imagined. A sprawling space filled with tables and booths where beings gathered to drink, feel, and avoid questions when she entered with her guards. Conversation didn't stop exactly, but it became more guarded. Eyes watching the Lumineth princess with wariness and calculation. She approached the bar where a massive Grelkin stood, polishing glasses with 3 of his 6 arms. "I'm looking for someone," she said directly, placing a credit chip on the counter that made the bartender's eyes widen. "The one they call the Wraith. Don't know anyone by that name," the Grelkin replied automatically. But his gaze kept flicking to the credit chip. Velshara placed another chip beside the first. "I don't mean any harm," she said earnestly. "They saved my life. I just want to say thank you." The bartender studied her for a long moment, then jerked one of his heads toward a corner booth, half hidden in shadow. "Can't promise anything," he rumbled quietly. "But there's someone over there who might be who you're looking for, or might not be. Either way, I never told you nothing." Velshara left the credit chips and made her way toward the booth. Her heart's pounding with anticipation. A figure sat alone, wearing civilian clothes but with the same general build she remembered from the attack. A hooded jacket pulled up to obscure their face. As she approached, the figure tensed, clearly recognizing her despite her attempts to dress less conspicuously. "I know it's you," Velshara said quietly, sliding into the seat across from them. "I just want to talk." "You shouldn't be here," the figure said. And even without the helmet's distortion, she recognized the voice. "You should be halfway to Lumineth space by now. I couldn't leave without thanking you properly," she insisted. "You saved my life. I did what anyone would do," they replied, still not raising their head to show their face. "No," Velshara said firmly. "You did what almost no one could do. The way you fought, the way you moved. I've never seen anything like it." The figure was silent for a moment, and she could sense the internal debate happening behind the hood. "Please," she added softly, "let me at least see the face of my savior." Slowly, reluctantly, the figure reached up and pulled back the hood. Velshara found herself staring at a face unlike any she had encountered in all her travels across the galaxy. The features were flat compared to most species, with a strange arrangement that somehow still conveyed strength and intelligence. The skin was a warm brown tone, smooth and organic rather than scaled or furred. The eyes were the most striking feature, dark and deep, holding an awareness that seemed to see through pretense and politics to something more fundamental. "What are you?" she whispered, not meaning it as an insult, but as genuine curiosity. "I've studied xenobiology. I met hundreds of species, but I've never—" The figure's mouth twisted in something that might have been a smile or a grimace. "I'm human," he said simply. And the words struck Velshara like a physical blow. Her crystalline form flickered through colors rapidly: shock white, confusion gray, disbelief orange. "That's impossible," she breathed, her mind reeling. "Humans are extinct. They've been gone for 3,000 years. We're good at hiding," the human replied, his dark eyes watching her reaction carefully. "And the galaxy was happy to believe we were gone." Velshara's education came flooding back. The legends told to children, the historical records that mentioned humanity only in passing, the warnings about the dangerous species that had spread too fast and burned too bright before vanishing into the darkness of history. And now one sat before her, very much alive, watching her with an expression that mixed wariness with something that might have been sadness. Velshara stared at the human across from her, her mind struggling to reconcile legend with reality, trying to process what this meant not just for her, but for the entire galaxy. "My name is Marcus Chun," the human said after a long silence, his voice carrying an accent she couldn't place. "And before you ask, yes, there are more of us, scattered across the frontier, living in the shadows." "How?" Velshara managed to ask, a voice barely above a whisper. The extinction event happened 3,000 years ago. Every world, every colony. Marcus's expression darkened, and she saw something ancient and painful flicker across his features. Not every world, he said quietly. Not every colony. Some of us survived in the outer reaches. Places too remote for the great empires to bother with. Places where we could hide among other species or simply disappear into the void. He leaned back in his seat, his eyes distant, as if seeing something far away. My ancestors were on a deep space research station when it happened. He continued. They saw the fleets coming, jumping system to system, glassing human worlds. And they shut down everything, went dark, drifted like debris for generations. Valshara felt her crystalline structure grow cold as the implications sank in. You're saying the extinction event wasn't natural, she said slowly. It was deliberate genocide. Your people's history books probably call it something else. Marcus replied with bitter accuracy. A tragic conflict, an unfortunate necessity. The removal of a destabilizing element from galactic politics. He was right, and the knowledge made her feel sick. She had been taught that humanity's disappearance was mysterious, possibly self-inflicted through warfare or technological catastrophe. Never that the great empires had coordinated to eliminate an entire species. Why? She asked, though part of her already knew the answer. What did humans do that was so terrible? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. We existed, he said simply. We adapted too quickly, learned too fast, refused to stay in our designated place in the galactic hierarchy. We formed alliances across species lines instead of staying isolated. We asked questions that made the empires uncomfortable. He met her eyes directly. Worst of all, he continued, we didn't have psychic powers or natural armor, or any of the biological advantages that the ruling species used to justify their dominance. We were just clever apes from a high-gravity Deathworld who refused to accept that we were inferior. Valshara's mind raced through her education, seeing it now through a different lens. The Lumineth prided themselves on their psychic abilities and long lifespans. Using these traits to argue, they were naturally suited to leadership. Other empires did the same with their own advantages. The Vraks with their strength, the Draven with their technological integration, each species claiming some inherent superiority. Humans, with no obvious biological edge, threatened that entire ideology. How did you defeat those pirates? She asked, changing the subject because the historical implications were too large to process all at once. You moved like you could predict their actions, fought like someone with decades of combat experience. Marcus considered her question carefully, as if deciding how much to reveal. Human evolution is unique, he began. We come from a world with strong gravity, extreme weather, and megafauna that could kill us easily. So we developed different advantages. He held up his hands, flexing the fingers. Endurance, he said. Humans can run for hours, days even, outlasting prey that's faster but exhausts quicker. Pattern recognition, our brains are wired to see connections, predict behavior, adapt strategies on the fly. But the way you moved, Valshara pressed. The speed, the precision, adrenaline response, Marcus explained. When threatened, human bodies flood with chemicals that increase strength, speed, reaction time, suppress pain. We call it fight or flight. It's a survival mechanism from when our ancestors had to escape predators or fight them off. He paused, then added almost reluctantly, and we're persistence hunters by nature. We evolved to chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion, which means we're very good at not giving up, at continuing when any sane being would quit. Valshara absorbed this information, understanding now why the empires had feared humanity. It wasn't any single ability, but the combination. Adaptability, endurance, pattern recognition, the refusal to accept limits or hierarchies. There's something else, Marcus continued. his voice softer now. Humans are social pack animals. We form bonds across genetic lines, adopt outsiders into our groups. We're wired to cooperate with anyone who proves trustworthy, regardless of their species or origin. That explained the alliance building that had worried the empires. Valshara realized while other species tended to stick with their own kind, forming insular power blocks, humans naturally created diverse coalitions that crossed traditional boundaries. In the old days, before the extinction event, Marcus said, there were human diplomats, explorers, merchants, scientists, working alongside every species you can imagine. We didn't see differences as barriers. We saw them as opportunities to learn, and that made you dangerous, Valshara finished. Understanding clicking into place, Marcus nodded slowly. We didn't fit into the neat hierarchies the empires had established. He confirmed. We couldn't be easily controlled or predicted. And worst of all, we were successful. Humanity was expanding, thriving, inspiring other species to question the status quo. He looked away, and she saw grief in his profile. So they eliminated us, he said quietly. Not because we were violent or aggressive, but because we represented change, possibility. The idea that maybe the old order wasn't the only way. Valshara reached across the table impulsively. Placing her crystalline hand over his, "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "I'm sorry my people participated in that. I'm sorry we let the lie persist for 3,000 years. Marcus looked at their joined hands with an expression of surprise, as if physical comfort was something he hadn't expected. "It wasn't you," he said gently. "You weren't alive then. None of your generation was. You can't be responsible for the sins of your ancestors, but I can be responsible for what happens now," Valshara countered, her mind made up even as she spoke. "I can help make sure it never happens again." Marcus pulled his hand back carefully, shaking his head. "You can't," he said. "If the empires find out humans still exist in any significant numbers, they'll do it again, maybe more thoroughly this time. The fear hasn't gone away, it's just dormant. Then we need to change that fear," Valshara insisted. "Bring humanity back into the light, but this time with eyes, with protections." "You're naive," Marcus said, but his tone was kind rather than cruel. "You're a princess. You've lived in palaces and diplomatic halls. You don't understand how deep the hatred and fear runs in the frontier worlds." "Then teach me," Valshara challenged. "Come with me, not as a prisoner, but as a consultant. Help me understand what really happened, why it happened, and what we need to do to prevent it from happening again." Marcus stared at her as if she had suggested jumping out an airlock without a suit. "You want me to travel to Lumineth space," he said slowly, "to the heart of one of the empires that tried to exterminate my species." "As what? Your pet human?" "As my friend," Valshara corrected firmly. "As someone I trust. As the person who saved my life and who I believe can help me make things right." She could see him wavering, logic warring with hope in his expression. "If I'm found out, if anyone realizes what I am," he began, "I'll protect you," Valshara promised. "With all my authority, with my family's name. With my life, if necessary." "Why?" Marcus asked, the question raw and honest. "Why would you risk everything for someone you just met? For a species you thought was extinct until an hour ago?" Valshara thought about her answer carefully, knowing it would determine everything that came after. "Because you saved my life without hesitation," she said finally. "Because you fight for people who can't fight for themselves. Because in the short time I've known you, you've shown more honor and courage than most of the nobles and diplomats I've dealt with my entire life." She met his dark eyes steadily. "And because if humans can survive 3,000 years of hiding, persecution and exile without losing their compassion and willingness to help others," she continued, "then they deserve a chance to come home, Marcus was quiet for a long time, emotions flickering across his face too quickly for her to read finally. He let out a long breath and nodded once. "All right," he said. "I'll come with you, but on one condition, if things go bad. If it looks like this is going to expose other human populations to danger, I walk away and you don't try to stop me." "Agreed," Velshara said immediately, relief flooding through her. Marcus stood, pulling his hood back up. "We should go," he said, quietly, before anyone notices a Lumineth princess having a long conversation with a suspicious freelancer. As they made their way out of the cantina, Velshara realized her life had just changed in ways she couldn't fully comprehend yet. She had set out to negotiate a treaty with the Krill Dominion, a relatively straightforward diplomatic mission. Instead, she had discovered that humanity still existed, that her people's history was built on lies and genocide, and that she had just convinced a member of a supposedly extinct species to walk into the heart of one of the empires that had tried to destroy them. The journey to Lumineth core space took 3 weeks, and Marcus spent most of that time in Velshara's private quarters aboard the diplomatic cruiser, away from the curious eyes of the crew. Sub-Commander Calran had protested bringing an unknown freelancer aboard, but Velshara had pulled rank and made it clear the decision was final. What the sub-commander didn't know, what no one aboard except Velshara knew, was exactly what Marcus was, and she intended to keep it that way until she understood more about what had really happened during the extinction event. Those 3 weeks became an education for both of them. Marcus told her stories of human history, not the sanitized versions in galactic databases, but the real accounts passed down through generations of survivors. He spoke of Earth, a world of blue oceans and green continents, with gravity that would crush most species, but which had forged humanity into endurance specialists. He described human culture, the art, music, literature, philosophy, the incredible diversity of thought and expression that came from a species that had evolved in thousands of different environments across one planet. "We never had a single culture," Marcus explained one evening as they sat looking at the stars. "We had thousands, maybe tens of thousands, each with their own languages, beliefs, technologies, and we fought each other constantly. But we also learned from each other, traded, intermarried, mixed our ideas until something new emerged." "That sounds chaotic," Velshara observed. Thinking of the Lumineth's carefully structured society, it was. Marcus agreed with a slight smile, but it also meant we were adaptable. When one approach failed, we had dozens of others to try. When one group got stuck in dogma, others were experimenting with new ideas. He looked at her with those dark, knowing eyes. The empires wanted everyone to follow their rules, their hierarchy, their way of doing things, he continued. But humans kept finding different approaches, and those approaches kept working. That's what really scared them, in turn. Velshara shared what she was learning from the restricted archives she had access to as a princess. Official history claimed the extinction event was a mysterious tragedy, possibly caused by human infighting or a plague of their own making. But as she dug deeper, using codes and clearances most Lumineth would never have, she found other records, military reports, diplomatic correspondence, coordination documents between multiple empires. The truth was there for anyone with the authority to look and the courage to accept what they found. There were meetings, she told Marcus one night, her voice tight with anger and shame. Secret councils where representatives from the major empires discussed the human problem. They didn't even try to hide what they were planning. They laid it all out. Simultaneous strikes on all known human colonies, disruption of supply lines, destruction of shipyards and industrial centers. She pulled up a document that made her feel physically ill. "This one is from a Lumineth admiral," she said quietly, recommending that any humans found be processed to prevent future resurgence. Processed, they meant killed. Exterminated like vermin. Marcus looked at the document with an expression that had grown familiar over the past weeks, pain mixed with resignation, as if this was exactly what he had expected to find. At least now, you know, he said softly. Your people weren't innocent bystanders. They were active participants, I know, Valshara whispered, her crystalline form flickering with colors that expressed grief and guilt. And I can never make up for that. But I can try to ensure it never happens again. She had been working on something during the journey. A proposal that grew more detailed each day as she learned more about both human capabilities and the political situation that had led to their near extinction. It was radical. Possibly career-ending, potentially dangerous for both her and Marcus, but it was also right. And she had been raised to believe that doing the right thing mattered more than political convenience. I want to present you to the High Council, she told Marcus. Watching his reaction carefully, his face went carefully neutral in the way she had learned meant he was suppressing strong emotions. As what? He asked. A curiosity, a specimen, proof that humans survived. As a person? Valshara insisted. As someone with rights, with a voice, as a representative of a species that deserves recognition and protection. Marcus stood and paced her quarters, his movements tight with tension. You understand what you're asking, he said, not looking at her. If you expose me to the Council, you expose every hidden human community in the galaxy. You make us visible, targetable, or you become too visible to target, Valshara countered. Right now, humans exist in legal limbo. No rights, no protections. Any empire can hunt you down with impunity because officially you don't exist. She moved to stand in front of him, forcing him to meet her gaze. But if the Lumineth formally acknowledge humanity's existence and right to self-determination, she continued, if we offer protection and diplomatic recognition, then attacking humans means attacking us. And why would your people agree to that? Marcus challenged. Why would they risk anything for a species they went to great lengths to eliminate? Because it's right, Valshara said simply, then added with more practical calculation. And because the Krill Dominion is still threatening war and having allies, even unexpected ones, strengthens our position. She had thought this through carefully. The Krill were powerful but pragmatic. They wouldn't want to fight both the Lumineth and an unknown number of humans with unknown capabilities. If nothing else, the uncertainty would give them pause. Marcus studied her for a long moment, and she could see him weighing options, calculating risks, trying to decide if he could trust her completely. There's something you should know, he said finally. I'm not the only human who's been operating in this sector. There are others, dozens of us, maybe hundreds. We have a network, communication channels. We've been watching the empires, gathering intelligence. Preparing for what? Valshara asked. Though she thought she knew, for the day when we couldn't hide anymore, Marcus replied. For the day when we'd have to fight or reveal ourselves. We've been building something, slowly, carefully. A coalition of the hidden and the forgotten. He pulled up a data display showing star charts with markers that meant nothing to Valshara initially. Then she realized what she was looking at. Human outposts, hidden stations, allied communities of other species who have been marginalized by the great empires. We're not alone, Marcus said quietly. There are others who don't fit into the galactic hierarchy, who survive in the cracks and shadows. And we've been making connections, forming bonds, sharing resources. Valshara felt a chill run through her crystalline form. You're building an alternative to the Empire system. She realized. Marcus nodded slowly. We didn't have a choice, he said. The Empire's made it clear there's no place for us in their vision of galactic order. So we're creating our own, parallel to theirs, ready to stand on its own if necessary. The implications were staggering. If humanity had been preparing for 3,000 years, building networks, forming alliances, developing capabilities in secret. Then they might not need the Lumina's protection after all. They might be much stronger than anyone realized. How many? Velshara asked. I don't know the full count, Marcus admitted. The network is compartmentalized for security, but enough that if the Empires tried another extinction event, they'd find it a lot harder this time. He looked at her seriously. That's why I'm willing to risk exposure. He continued, not just because I trust you, though I do, but because the time for hiding might be over anyway. Better to come out on our terms, with all eyes, than to be forced out during a crisis. They stood in silence for a moment, both understanding that they were at a turning point not just for themselves, but potentially for the entire galaxy. When we reach Lumineth Prime, Velshara said finally, I'll request an audience with the High Council. I'll present evidence of the extinction event's true nature, and I'll formally propose recognition of humanity and a mutual defense pact. They might refuse, Marcus warned. They might see me as a threat and move to eliminate me. Then they'll have to go through me first. Velshara replied with steel in her voice. Marcus smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes. You know, he said, I can see why humans used to form alliances so easily. If there were more beings like you in positions of power, maybe we wouldn't have needed to hide. I'm not unique, Velshara protested. You are, Marcus said softly. You're willing to risk everything because it's right, not because it benefits you. That's rarer than you think. The ship's intercom interrupted them, announcing they would be arriving at Lumineth Prime within 6 hours their time for. Preparation was over. Whatever happened next would determine not just their fates, but possibly the fate of every human still hiding. In the shadows across the galaxy, Velshara returned to her duties, preparing her arguments and gathering her evidence, while Marcus checked his weapons and equipment. A warrior preparing for a battle that would be fought with words, but might end in violence, as the massive crystal spires of Lumineth Prime came into view through the viewport. Beautiful and cold and ancient, both of them felt the weight of history pressing down. They were about to challenge 3,000 years of lies and fear. They were about to demand that the galaxy acknowledge its sins and make amends. Lumineth Prime was more beautiful than Marcus had imagined. A world of crystalline towers that caught sunlight and transformed it into cascading rainbows. Bridges of pure energy connecting spires that reached into the clouds. The very air shimmering with psychic resonance that made his skin prickle. It was also the most dangerous place a human could be. The heart of one of the empires that had orchestrated the near extinction of his. Spacious Velshara had secured him quarters in the palace itself. A suite that was probably meant to honor visiting dignitaries, but which Marcus saw as a gilded cage guard stood at every entrance. Not obviously hostile, but clearly monitoring his movements. Word had spread somehow, palace intrigue being what it was, that the princess had brought back someone unusual from her disastrous diplomatic mission within hours of their arrival. The summons came. The High Council wished to question Princess Velshara about the attack on her vessel and her subsequent actions. She sent word back immediately, formally requesting a full session to present evidence of critical importance to the Empire's security. The Council, intrigued or suspicious or both, agreed to hear her the following day. That night, Velshara came to Marcus's quarters to find him staring out at the city, his expression unreadable. Having second thoughts, she asked gently. Marcus turned to face her, and she saw the conflict in his eyes. I've spent my entire life avoiding this moment, he said quietly, staying hidden, staying safe. And now I'm about to walk into a room full of beings whose ancestors tried to exterminate mine and tell them I exist. You don't have to, Velshara reminded him. We can still back out, find another way. But Marcus shook his head. No, he said firmly. You were right. The time for hiding is over. If we want to survive as more than shadows, we need to take this risk. He smiled without humor. "Besides," he added, "I've seen what you're willing to do for what's right. The least I can do is back you up." The next morning, Valshara stood before the High Council in the Chamber of Light, a vast circular room where 12 of the most powerful lumineth in the Empire sat in elevated seats, their crystalline forms ancient and imposing. Her father, Emperor Thalsharan, occupied the central position, his colors shifting between the deep blue of wisdom and the purple of concern. Marcus stood beside her, unmasked at her insistence, wearing simple clothes that marked him as neither warrior nor diplomat, but simply as himself. The murmur that ran through the council when they saw him was like static electricity, shock and confusion rippling through their psychic connections. Princess Valshara, her father's voice was carefully neutral. "You requested this session to present evidence of importance. We are prepared to hear you." Valshara stepped forward, her own colors shifting to show respect, but also determination. "Honored Council," she began, "I come before you to speak truth about our history, about choices our ancestors made, and about a wrong that has persisted for 3,000 years. She activated her data display, showing the restricted files she had found, the coordination documents, the military reports, the diplomatic correspondence. The extinction event, she said clearly, was not a tragedy. It was genocide, planned and executed by the major empires, including our own, targeting every human colony and settlement in known space. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Council members erupted in protests, some claiming she was mistaken, others demanding to know where she got such information. Still others, simply refusing to believe. Her father raised a hand for silence, his colors darkening with concern. "These are serious accusations." "Daughter," he said gravely, "if they are true, they are true." Valshara interrupted, something she would never normally do in formal council. "The evidence is here, in our own archives, hidden but not destroyed." She gestured to Marcus. "And this is the proof that our genocide was not complete." She continued, "This is Marcus Chun, and he is human." The chamber exploded into chaos. Several council members surged to their feet, some calling for guards, others reaching for weapons. Still others simply staring in shock at something they believed had been extinct for millennia. Impossible. One elder counselor declared, his voice shaking, "The humans are gone. This must be a trick, a clone, a genetic experiment. I assure you I'm quite real." Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I'm not alone. There are humans across the frontier, living in secret because we know what happens when empires notice us." "This is outrageous," another counselor shouted, a younger member whose colors blazed with anger and fear. The human species was unstable, dangerous. Their removal was necessary for galactic peace. Was it? Valshara challenged, her own colors flaring. Or was it simply convenient? A way to eliminate competition, to remove a species that didn't fit into your hierarchy. She pulled up more documents, these ones showing human achievements before the extinction event, scientific discoveries, artistic works, diplomatic successes, evidence of a species that had been innovative and cooperative, not dangerous or unstable. The humans were killed because they were different, she said flatly. Because they formed alliances across species lines, because they adapted too quickly, because they questioned authority and proposed alternatives to the Empire system. And they should be eliminated again. A harsh voice cut through the debate. Everyone turned to see the Krill ambassador stepping forward from where he had been observing the council session, his insectoid form clicking with agitation. The Krill Dominion has been monitoring this situation, the ambassador announced, his translator rendering his clicks into standard galactic. We know about the human aboard this ship. We know what he represents. Marcus tensed beside Valshara, his hand moving instinctively. toward where his weapon would be if he had been allowed to carry one into the council chamber. The Dominion demands you surrender the human to us for study, the ambassador continued. His biology, his capabilities, his species survival strategies, all of these are of interest to us. He turned his multifaceted eyes to the council. If you refuse, he said coldly, the Dominion will consider it an act of hostility. We will take military action to secure this asset. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Emperor Thalsharan's colors shifted through several shades before settling on something that resembled cold fury. You come into our chamber, he said with dangerous quiet, and threaten us, demanding we surrender a guest under our protection. Protection? The Krill ambassador laughed. A disturbing sound. You mean the species you tried to exterminate. Now suddenly you care about their well-being. It was exactly the wrong thing to say. Valshara saw her father's colors flash with something she had rarely witnessed. Genuine rage at the exposure of their hypocrisy. Daughter, the Emperor said, his voice cutting through the tension. You have presented evidence and made accusations. Now tell us what you propose. Valshara took a deep breath. Knowing this was the moment everything hinged on. Propose formal recognition of humanity's existence and right to self-determination, she said clearly. I propose a mutual defense pact between the Lumineth Empire and human communities. I propose we acknowledge our historical wrong and work to make amends. Madness. Several counselors muttered, wisdom. Others countered, the council was splitting. She could see it. Some horrified by what she suggested. Others intrigued. Still others simply confused. And if we refuse, one elder asked, what then? Then you tell the galaxy that the Lumineth Empire values convenience over justice, Valshara replied. You tell them that we learned nothing from our past, that we're willing to allow genocide to stand unchallenged. She stepped forward, her colors blazing with passion. But worse than that, she continued. You tell every species watching that if they don't fit the Empire model, if they're too different or too innovative or too questioning, they might be next. Marcus added his own voice, addressing the council directly despite protocol. Humans have survived in hiding for 3,000 years, he said. We've built networks, formed alliances, developed capabilities you know nothing about. We don't need your recognition to exist. He met the Emperor's gaze steadily, but we prefer to exist openly. As partners rather than ghosts, he continued. We prefer to contribute to galactic civilization rather than hide from it. And we prefer to believe that the empires can change, can learn, can be better than they were. The Krill ambassador made a sound of disgust. The Dominion will not accept this, he declared. If you formalize relations with humans, we will consider it an act of war. Emperor Thalsharan stood, his full height making him tower over the assembly, his colors shifting to the gold that indicated imperial authority. Then the Dominion should prepare for war, he said with finality, because the Lumineth Empire does not surrender guests to threats. And we do not repeat the mistakes of our past. He looked at his daughter with something that might have been pride. Princess Valshara has shown us truth we did not want to see, he continued. She has confronted us with our failures, and she has proposed a path forward that honors both justice and practicality. The Emperor turned to address the full council. The human species was nearly destroyed by our actions, he said gravely. They survived through strength we did not credit them with. They have every reason to hate us. Yet they come offering partnership rather than vengeance.